clarity, strategy, and step-by-step moves, here's what you need to know from this week's Friday Focus on KGCI, Real Estate On Air.
Welcome to Probate Weekly. I'm your guest, Bill Gross. And one of the things that has to happen in almost every probate is a bond. In California, it might be a minimal bond, it might be a large bond, unless it's waived specifically, a very, very common requirement for almost every probate. And I find people get tripped up in the process of bond. So how you get the bond is important. But more than that, on this episode, we're going to be able to talk to somebody who regularly talks to attorneys and petitioners in a probate case to kind of learn from their angle what they see, and hopefully will help us be better in our business. I'm really excited to have today from Jet Surety, Bryce Desai. We've talked before. Bryce, welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
And so talk a little bit about how do you see Jet Surety fitting in? I know you guys have a number of other related businesses, but you're in the probate division. Talk about the probate division. How do you see yourself fitting into the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a surety bond company that specializes in lots of types, like you said, probate being one. And one thing that sets us apart in our value proposition is that we will work directly with the petitioner, with the administrator, with the attorney. So our business model is unlike traditional insurance companies where they broker bonds from sureties. We are the actual source, and we will provide the bonds directly. And with that ties in our expertise in the probate space, California in particular, as well as our service. We're always available and very customer service oriented.
And if I remember right, I've been on your website before, you guys do offer a calculator right online. So rather than have a mystery as to what the cost is, somebody go online, answer some simple questions, and as a result, get a quote for what a bond's going to be.
That's funny you mentioned. We're actually working on setting up that calculator right now. We've got a pricing grid on there where you can base what the bond amount will be. You can base that range off of what an approximate price will be. Mm-hmm. And then, one thing that's really important to our business model is that you can shoot us a quick email and give us a phone call, and we'll give you a price in seconds. But that online feature will be available soon, very, very soon.
Okay, so let's talk about, again, you are available to petitioners, I would say B2C, the actual consumer of the product rather than just through the provider, which is a little bit different. Do you get phone calls from people who are searching to start the process? Do you get phone calls from people maybe who were turned down by another bond? Do you get called by people who maybe got quoted and think the bond is too expensive and then you're able to provide competition? Where's the majority of your intake come from?
Yes, all of the above apply and, come in on a daily basis. The most common inquiry we'll get will be when someone recently got that order appointing them with the bond requirement and they're shopping around to get an understanding of what the price will be and, what a bond even is, because that's a common first question. Right. But oftentimes too, attorneys will call in and make sure that their client is bondable before they even file the petition and invest hundreds into starting the process. And then commonly too, if someone's had trouble elsewhere, perhaps they don't have an attorney, a little bit lower on the financial side, we work with them and try to find a solution that makes sense for both of us.
I know some bond companies will bond somebody who's otherwise unbondable if the attorney is on the bond as well and a signature on the bank account. Do you guys offer that product?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's a great solution. That's very common in conservatorships, which could come up in California probate where, let's say there's a significant amount of cash or other types of assets that the conservatee has. If the attorney is on that and we set up some type of funds control, that's, an excellent point where we can move towards an approval. Another instance too, where, if we just get written confirmation that the attorney's going to stay involved and we get some guarantees on that front, that's another way where we can get it approved. And, we're flexible because we specialize in probate. So we have what we like to think is a very strong understanding of what the risks truly are. And so we can, really speak with the principal or the petitioner, speak with the attorney, get a good feel for the case, and then we'd be able to provide someone a bond where otherwise they'd be unbondable.
Right. And that's the challenge. And I always tell people just because one bond company won't approve you doesn't mean you're not bondable. You're not bondable to that company, But it's like everything else, like mortgage loans or like insurance, that companies have different criteria, different appetites, different structures, different days of the week, and all those factor in. And you always want to get another opinion before you give up, because not getting the bond can make the process much more difficult and slow down. So, so you do have people called, who are shopping around, obviously, which could either mean they're looking for a better price and or they've been declined. So let's talk about both those possibilities. I find declined is because the bond company they talked to didn't offer solutions, but just said you don't fit in this box. So I know in working with you, it sounds like you're looking to, if necessary, create the right box for somebody to fit into.
That's a great way to put it. That's exactly right. And that's some pretty common feedback we've gotten from past customers where, let's say, someone's extremely well qualified on their own personally, but it's getting into $1 million, $2 million estate, and they're refusing to bring on an attorney, often because they want to save expenses for the heirs and themselves and their siblings. We'll work with them, get a good understanding and of their professional experience, and get a quote in that way. But yeah, absolutely. It's all about just getting an understanding for the situation and not being too rigid in the underwriting requirements, because every probate case is unique.
Now, I'm sure you also like to work with people who have recurring business, i.e. attorneys or fiduciaries. And so there they have a relationship. You've already underwritten them once. You've seen them perform maybe a couple of times, or they have a history that you can go back and look at. Are they more likely? Are they, is a fiduciary going to be, I imagine, more bondable just because they're professional and they're in the business? Do you have, though, also other service options or other advantages to fiduciaries or attorneys who are looking to get bonded themselves in a case like this?
Yeah, certainly. That's actually one of our bigger marketing pieces, where we have a dedicated program set up for attorney partners. We're just now pushing 1,000 attorneys signed up with us. And what that'll be is where they have a custom application where, say, their client comes in and needs a bond. They have an application branded with their law firm. They have a dashboard where they can access all of their clients' bonds from the past and this new case. And it's basically just a full one-stop shop for their bond, where everything goes through them and they're the ones creating the value for the client. And we're just doing all the work in the background.
So is the bond then already in place because the attorney's bonded and they're just doing this to guarantee the portion, or it is actually creating a new bond each time, but they have a format and a tool to make it easier?
It's more of the latter. They have that tool to make it easier.
Got it. Excuse me. So, I also know that sometimes attorneys get customers who are tight for the cash, like maybe they're inheriting, a lot of property. There's no liquid assets. So do bonds have to be paid in cash for the full year up front to get issued? What's the cash flow look like on getting a bond for an estate?
Right. That can be a burden because we would require payment up front. That would be debit or credit card or a paper check being mailed to us. One important point that we always emphasize, though, is that the bond is an estate-related expense, to where, there may be a stress on having cash up front, but that expense isn't something that should be taken out of the administrator's pocket. It should be coming from the estate. And we emphasize that, here's your receipt. Make sure you include this in your accounting and get reimbursed for it. And oftentimes, too, depending on the relationship, the attorney can advance the premium, or if a realtor's involved, helping with the property sale and making sure that the listing goes through, they'll advance the premium as well.
So when the customer pays for the bond, let's say they do the application, what's a typical time to get underwritten, or what's a range of the most likely time periods from application to them getting from you, hey, you're approved, as soon as you pay this, then we can issue the bond?
Yeah, one thing that we pride on is just our instant quote options. So for any estate where there's an administrator executor, you can get an instant quote up to $250,000, where you start the application, go through it in 5 minutes, and then you'll have your quote ready to purchase. So it can be as little as 5 minutes, or if there's some type of complexity to the estate, we'll underwrite it and review it within a day or two, and then they'll be able to purchase the bond online. Usually when folks come in, they leave happy with the bond in far less than a week.
Okay. And then how long, once they decide to make the purchase, they put their credit card in and pay for it, what's the time from then to the actual issuance of the bond?
The bond would get issued automatically, and a copy by email
Oh,
would go immediately to their their email inbox. The probate bond process is a little old school, like other aspects of the court, where you'd have to wait for the original to come from the
right.
surety. So we'll get that mailed on the same day that they purchase it, but unless they're doing overnight delivery, we've got to wait for the post office to get it to them.
Got it. So the bond, is people get proof of the letters and they shop for the bond, they get proof of the bond, they pay for the bond shows up, then they have letters. It always seems to me that you look at people's incentives. A bonding company that I've worked with quite a bit, unfortunately, or I say very commonly, it's almost like they're glad that things drag out, because then what happens is the renewal comes up and they almost get like a second year, insurance policy. If the probate takes, a year and a week, they get a second year they charge, versus if it closes in 11 months, they only get 1 year. So let's talk about that. The renewal, is it, do they pay for the whole year? Do they have to pay for it in advance? Is it a refunded portion, or is that just kind of, most bond companies, that's just the way it goes. Once you pass a year, that second year you pay for in advance and you're kind of out that money. How does it work with your company?
Yeah, we try to keep in mind that probates do typically take 12 to 18 months. And so on that 18th month category, you probably will need to renew the bond, but you won't need it for that full year. So we'll always make sure that we provide a prorated refund based on the day that the estate is actually closed. So in that 18th month example, someone might have to come in and pay $2,000 for their $1 million bond renewal, but once it actually does get closed 6 months into the second year, they'll be able to get a good refund of about half of that back. So we do make sure, and honestly, we do like when the estate's closed within a year, because that shows that the estate's being handled well, promptly, and people are doing what they're supposed to in terms of getting that probate closed.
Right. Now, in your case, you're not as concerned about the equity of the probate estate because you're getting paid in advance. Maybe the attorney or other vendors are concerned about that. So really, you do your best. When they say the house is worth $1 million, maybe I guess you go online and check Zillow or Redfin or something to get a ballpark. But at the end of the day, you don't really care much because they're going to pay the fee either way, and you're insured based on. They're not going to overclaim the assets because they just pay more for the bond that they wouldn't otherwise need, right?
Exactly. That would lead to a higher bond amount and therefore a higher premium by the court. And the actual, because it's very difficult when you get started with probate and when the bond is actually needed, because you don't have letters yet. You can't actually get a good understanding of what an asset might be worth. And so whenever a property is ended up being sold, then those accurate numbers will get reported to the court. And more so on a national scale, if a bond amount is needed to be increased, we'll certainly find out, because the court won't let anything further happen without that.
What states do you operate in, or are there any states that you don't operate in?
We operate in all 50 states. So everything
Nice.
from Alaska to Florida and everywhere in between. California is it's our biggest premium state, and we've issued the second highest number of bonds there, right behind our home state, North Carolina.
Oh, North Carolina is your first. That's your home state. Interesting. Is that because you started there and built up the relationships there? Is that what that's about?
Exactly. Yeah, we're relatively new compared to other sureties, just being founded in 2018. But we started up in Charlotte and have slowly expanded. We've got an office in Sacramento now, but North Carolina is always home.
Nice. Good for you. So, in some regards, you're in a similar business to real estate agents who might be watching this, in that we try to develop relationships with attorneys or fiduciaries who send us business regularly. We often get our customers not directly, but through those third parties. Talk a little bit about what you do to develop relations and maintain relations with attorneys and professionals that refer you business.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think the biggest aspect of that is the service portion, because there are a million bond companies out there. And oftentimes, once an attorney secures a bond for one client, that's the bonding company moving forward. And so whenever a realtor may come in or an attorney may come in, we want to make sure that we're providing them with the absolute best service. And the same applies to a realtor working with anybody else. If you're applying and giving them the best possible service, then that relationship is established. And so, making sure that our customer service is top tier is one point, but another point is the education aspect. Many people who are going through probate, they aren't even expecting the bond. They're just now getting their head wrapped around what the court case is. And so us being able to be readily available and accessible to the realtor, they can come into us before their client meeting, learn everything they need to know about the bond, and then have that expertise in their back pocket to create value for their client.
So it would seem to me that, this is what I would think of as a B2B podcast where most I'm dealing with professionals like you, attorneys, fiduciaries, vendors and such. I have two actually separate podcasts, but one's Executorium, which is oriented towards executors of estates and things like that. So I guess my question, and there the education is a little different. I do try to keep in front of my prospective customers by showing them, I'm educating them regularly and become a resource. Do you do any kind of marketing to the consumer directly? Obviously, you can do Google ads and Facebook ads to generate leads, but do you do anything kind of educationally to explain to customers what bonds are? Because I know I end up explaining it to customers from time to time. I know it's a very misunderstood. Even attorneys don't really understand the process and what's involved with it.
Yeah, certainly. The Google ads is the main way to market in terms of B2C, but also, kind of running in line with that is organic SEO marketing, where you create these informative guides, you pour over each state's probate code and state statutes, and you develop an in-depth, everything you need to know manual about that state's bond. And that'll naturally rank highly on Google, which will, therefore get more, consumer eyes. But then that also, in two birds, one stone, it gives them that educational piece to where they'll find us immediately and then learn everything they need to know about the bond.
Got it. What do you see as the biggest challenge that attorneys have in building their business? Meaning you deal with people, of course, they're just a customer and they might just apply for a bond and you provide it. I'm showing the way you're developing relationships with people. What do you see as the biggest challenge on developing more business, whether it be a realtor or an attorney, and gain trust from a state so they work with them rather than turn to them after they've started on their own?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think in terms of bringing in new business from folks we wouldn't usually work with, I think it's getting past the barrier of the cemented relationships that are in the probate space, because everybody has their go-to bond company. And if a new client comes in, they'll apply with that current company, perhaps get denied, and they'll see it as, okay, this person isn't bondable. It's not, oh, perhaps there's another solution out there. So I think a way to overcome that solution is, doing things like this, meeting with you, Bill, and, networking with as many people as possible. I think just adding that extra bit of exposure, helps us get in front of people where that might need the bond, because our service and our pricing is there. We definitely have that superior service. It's just a matter of getting our foot in the door.
Well, there's nobody in my experience who has an attorney that either isn't bondable or can't be bonded with the attorney if the bond company does its job properly, in my experience. And I think that's where oftentimes we all get a little lazy sometimes, or shortcut, or we're busy, and people, like you say, they have their preferred vendor and they get turned down, and it's easy to say, well, you're not bondable. And that's not really the right answer. And in many cases, they maybe didn't need the bond. The attorney didn't ask for the right type of authority, and they end up having to get a bond for whatever reason, as well as another option. So it just seems to me that you're right. And you said something that really rings with me as a real estate agent. Every attorney has their go-to realtor before they meet me. My goal is to supplant them and say, well, I do a lot more than them. Here's the things I do for you. One of which is, who's your bond company? I always ask them that. Who are you working with? And if they're not working with somebody that I know, I'm going to bring somebody in that I know and explain how they can create value. So that's a very interesting process. Now, is your marketing mostly one-on-one? Do you do, is that meaning an attorney calls you in and says, hey, I have this one case, and then from there you turn that into a relationship, or how does that process look to you?
Yeah. We, Google Ads is perhaps our most prominent, marketing strategy, because often when people are needing to get into probate bonds, they're doing that initial research. And then on top of that too, we do like working directly with attorneys in terms of bringing new licensed attorneys in. There's publicly available information on lawyers.com and resources like that where you can get attorney information and, send them some solicitations or mailers introducing ourselves. And that does work very well. And that's, perhaps an option for realtors to get their foot into the door with new attorneys and creating those relationships is, there's a lot of publicly available information online that you could reach your customer with or your target audience with.
And especially now with the AI to take that public information, reformat it into some sort of marketing piece and make it look like yours, or make it yours in essence. And I think if you want to learn about it, I always tell people, learn one thing about the industry and then, understand it, reformat into a message you can give out, whether it be a video like I'm doing here or do it a graphic piece or brochure, and share that with your customer base. And the idea there is the more you do that, the more valuable you're going to be to your customers and more likely they are to choose you. Well, look, Bryce, obviously you can talk about bonds forever because you do every day. And I find it really deep, and I think we've done a nice job kind of giving an oversight. The best way to get more information about your company, number one, is your website, jetsurety.com, Jet as a rocket jet. You guys are so fast, surety, surety.com. And then you have a link tree, which is linktr.ee/Jet Probate. So Jet Probate is your social media. And there you have Get Started, Probate Solutions for Realtors, Probate Bond Guide, how to get approved, and then also scheduling a meeting with one of your, is that you or one of your team members, I guess, either one. Hopefully it's you if they got lucky. If not, they'll get somebody else. Bryce, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us about Jet Surety and the bonds, and thank you for your help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And again, jetsurety.com is the website, and Bryce is the contact person we deal with. I'm Bill Gross. This is Probate Weekly. We get together every week and talk about how to be more effective as probate professionals, whether you're a real estate agent or an attorney or vendor in the probate space. We have a Facebook group where you can continue the conversation. If you want to get reminders, probateweekly.com. You can put your email address in, optional if you want to add your phone number for occasional text links. And if you scroll down, you can both get it on other audio formats as well as get past episodes on YouTube. Love to have you join us. I'm Bill Gross at BillGrossProbate.com on social media. And as always, make today your best day ever. Thank you so much.